Hello, I'm Dr. Garrett Boyer. Welcome to Gospel Minded, where we spend a few minutes each week talking about psychology, our emotions, behavioral health, and we reflect on how these important topics are related to the gospel reading for each Sunday. I point out every week, and this week is no different, this isn't a substitute for actually getting yourself to church or participating in counseling or spiritual direction or therapy if you are involved in those sort of practices. But like we know so well, things of the mind, things of our psychology, so often go beautifully hand in hand with our spirituality. If this is your first time looking at Gospel Minded, welcome. Thank you for being here. If you are coming back, thank you. Glad to see you. Either way, I hope that you'll hit subscribe so that you never miss an episode of Gospel Minded. So today's reading comes again from the Gospel of Mark, and we are in chapter 10, and it starts with 46. And man, this is such an intriguing text because I think there is a lot to unpack. Like I say every week, certainly there's a lot here spiritually, but boy, there are a lot of things that are relevant in this text today for our psychology as well. So it's Mark 10, starting with verse 46. Let me read just a little bit of it. It says, "And they came to Jericho, and as he was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a great multitude, Bartimaeus, a blind beggar, the son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, 'Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me.' And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he cried out all the more, 'Son of David, have mercy on me.' And Jesus stopped and said, 'Call him.' And they called the blind man, saying to him, 'Take heart, rise, he is calling you.' And throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. And Jesus said to him, 'What do you want me to do for you?' And the blind man said to him, 'Master, let me receive my sight.' And Jesus said to him, 'Go your way, your faith has made you well.' And immediately he received his sight and followed him on the way." I don't know about you, but that text just really gets to me. Anytime I hear this passage, and today was no different when I was at Mass, hearing this text proclaimed, it's really such a beautiful passage. Certainly, so much can be said about this from the spiritual perspective, receiving the sight, asking Jesus to give sight, whether that means physical healing or insight, spiritual illumination, all of that is great. But psychologically speaking, you know what was coming to my mind when I was reading this and hearing this proclaimed at Mass today? It was actually this guy. "I am not throwing away my shot." Remember that from Hamilton? That great tune. "I'm not throwing away my shot." Um, One thing that I have observed over the course of the years now that I've been working with patients as a psychologist is that nothing eats at a person more than when they feel they've had a shot and they didn't take it. This reminds me of a scene that I once saw from uh, a wise philosopher, Homer Simpson. Let's see the clip.
On the other hand, when you don't take advantage of an opportunity, you can end up regretting it for the rest of your life.
You're right, Mark. Just like the time I could have met Mr. T at the mall. The entire day I kept saying, "I'll go a little later. I'll go a little later." And then when I got there, they told me he just left. And when I asked the mall guy if he would ever come back again, he said he didn't know. Well, I'm never going to let something like that happen again.
Yeah. So isn't that sad? Homer had a chance to meet Mr. T. He didn't take his shot. He threw away his shot. Now that's a silly and kind of funny clip, but that experience of being able to have a chance at something and you willingly not taking it, boy, that eats at people. And that causes so much angst, frustration, anxiety, depression, despair. It's one thing if we screw something up. I've got a big interview coming up and I don't say all the right things and I feel like I blew it. I wanted to make a good impression on somebody that I'm meeting for the first time. Maybe you're going out on a date for the first time and you want to say the right things and present just the right way. And oops, you spilled your water all over your lap or worse, over your date's lap. Ay, ay, ay. Yeah, you blew it. Okay. And that's all bad and nobody loves that. But what really grates on somebody is not even getting the shot. And especially not getting it because of something I have done. I threw away my shot. I missed Mr. T. I didn't do this or that or the other thing. So, when I looked up some research on the psychology of this, there really isn't a ton of stuff out there. There's a lot of literature on taking chances and risk mitigation and that kind of thing. And there are a ton of different algorithms and formulas and things that we can use as guides for understanding what's appropriate risk to accept and that sort of stuff. And that's all important too. I mean, think about when you're meeting somebody for the first time or going on the interview. I mean, you assume some kind of risk. You might be rejected. You might do something foolish. You might be hurt by the outcome. But I really didn't see a ton of literature about not taking a shot. And yet we know experientially, and I've seen countless times as a therapist, that when people don't take that chance, that really causes some problems in between their ears. And they feel like something that could have and would have come to fruition just never got off the road. So my advice is to take the shot, just like Bartimaeus in today's gospel, in spite of the opposition. They tried to silence him. Be quiet. They rebuked him, it said. And yet he called out all the more. Jesus, he's wanting to be heard. Now, this is the other piece of this. Taking your shot is one thing, but what about sticking it? And what about making it a fruitful exercise? I think that's the thing that impresses me so much with this story today of Bartimaeus, with this passage. Not only does he take his shot, he hears that Jesus is coming, and he's persistent in taking his shot. He calls out. He goes against them when they rebuke him. But then how about this? He is articulate with what he wants. Jesus calls him. He goes to the Lord, and Jesus says, "What do you want me to do for you?" And he says, "Master, let me receive my sight." And so this is another important point. How many times has it happened that we actually get a shot and take those opportunities, and for whatever reason, we are ill-prepared or not ready, or perhaps we are starstruck and we can't mutter or mumble the words out? Can you imagine if Bartimaeus went through all the trouble to call Jesus and finally get his attention, and then Jesus asked that question, "What do you want me to do for you?" And Bartimaeus was like, I feel like I could probably do that if, I don't know, I met the Pope or the president or some big famous figure. I think it's easy enough to imagine ourselves getting kind of tongue-tied. But he knows exactly what he wants, and he articulates it. And I think when you and I take a shot with whatever it is, taking that risk, getting that chance is one thing, but making sure that we land it is another important thing. So, mentalization. If you haven't heard me talk about this before, you're going to hear me talk about it today and probably a ton of times because I'm a big fan. Thinking through, if I have this opportunity, if I take that shot, what's it going to look like? How can this work? So professional athletes do this a lot. Public speakers do this a lot. To imagine in your mind, in as much detail as you can, make it as vivid as you possibly can in your mind, what the situation will look like, Who will be there? What will they be wearing? What does the environment look like? What sounds will I hear? Getting your senses kind of acclimated as well. If you're doing an interview, what kind of questions might they ask? How can I respond to them? What happens if they ask me a question that I'm not prepared for? And thinking this through and actually working the scene out in your mind, it's tremendously helpful. And there's a lot of research suggesting that it is beneficial. And like I mentioned, professional athletes, they're finding a lot of performance enhancement when they think through. A basketball player imagines making that free throw. They visualize it in their head. And they can imagine themselves shooting the ball, getting it up in the air, making their shot. The mentalization, the science behind it is, we're still trying to unpack it. We don't necessarily know everything about why it works, but we know that it works. And so take your shot and know what your shot is going to look like. Have a game plan. Be prepared. Be ready to go in. And, how many times do we have a shot to become better followers of Christ, to be better neighbors to the people around us, to be better colleagues, co-workers, friends, spouses, fathers, mothers, peers, whatever. We have a lot of opportunities. We do a lot of things to try and put ourselves into position to get the opportunities to flourish and make the best of our life. And then the other piece of that is, when we get those good opportunities, let's make sure that we're using them and taking advantage of those opportunities the best we can. Good stuff? I think it's good stuff. I hope you thought so too. I hope that you'll come back next week, and I'll see you then. Until then, let's pray for one another. I'm Dr. Garrett Boyer. This is Gospel Minded. Take care.